Today we've got a very special guest on the channel, and that is Luke Johnson, or for those of you who don't know, Clanty, who is a very, very good player and a very good friend of mine. Luke and I have been studying together for about 6 or 7 years, and I've got to say, if there's one piece of advice that you can take away from today's video, other than the wealth of poker knowledge that Luke is going to embark, is that finding somebody that you can relate to, that you don't butt heads with, that you can become friends with, who you can support one another through thick and thin with in the poker space, is the most valuable thing that you can do as a professional poker player. As we all know, we are kind of lone wolves in this field. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. We do, in fact, have Luke Johnson, and that is Clanty. How are we, mate? How are we getting on?
How you doing, mate? Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
So basically, I played a session about 4 or 5 days ago, and I probably played for about an hour, but I cut it down for the most interesting hands, and there's about 30 minutes of footage. So I'm going to play it, and hopefully we're going to review the hands in kind of real time, but obviously I will pause as well. There are definitely some questionable hands in here, as always, but we're just going to run it and then kind of see how we go, okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll give you reads as well if you have any questions about players. I think I'll always tell you about the players I'm playing.
Yeah, I don't have any reads on these guys.
So this player, yeah, from Austria, basically assumed that they were some kind of reg, but I hadn't played with them much, so I didn't have huge amount of reads. I was going to go for mixed raise on the flop. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be using more 7x or 4x here, but I figured that both of them will raise some of the time. Yeah, this is 1.5 pot. I did actually consider some amount of turn shove, and then I realized that just never shoving anything within my range here.
Yeah, that's fair.
So river plan is just to shove versus bet.
Yeah.
Most of the time, or all of the time, sorry, versus normal bet sizes. My question is, if you face 150 on the river here, do we shove or do you just call versus an unknown player?
Yeah, I would auto call. If this ace was a heart, then I would auto shove because you've got the ace king jack taken. Versus pots, it's definitely closer. Firstly, ask ourselves, does he bet call the ace king ace jack region too much? Perhaps he might do that because, especially if he's got ace heart king, ace heart jack, because that's realistically your only flushes here. Yeah. You're not going to arrive. Yes, you do have some 4x, but I think it's pretty easy just to kind of sit there and press call with your ace king, ace heart king, ace heart jack, which is definitely not going to be pure calling.
Fair.
Because I imagine that's some of your bluffs. So, yeah, I think if we can infer he would call too much with that region, I would exploit shove. In game, I know I wouldn't get to that conclusion so fast. I'd probably just press call here, to be honest with you.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because my conclusion in game was I feel that this pot sizing of the river is even though we don't know the player, it feels relatively custom. And in my video before, someone asked what custom meant, it's kind of we're expecting to see mostly 2/3 here, expecting to see maybe some overbets, but pot is kind of a little bit of a less expected sizing, I would say. So I was a little bit sus, but also didn't want to make too many assumptions as well.
I think that is an assumption. I think that's a slight projection because you wouldn't play pot. Oh, nice, good savings.
Yeah,
70 pot overbet is pretty. I think versus pot in theory, it's an auto call. To be clear, I think shoving is a mistake in theory. I'm only thinking if we can get him to call too much of the 2-pair region. If he just plays too many folds with the 2 pairs, it's just a complete torch. You need to have him call too much. Even if he calls it theory, I don't believe you're supposed to be shoving this. Okay,
so yeah, obviously open ace king. This is small blind. Don't know if you played this player. Extraordinarily overly aggressive, spewy. So yeah, I'm going to 4-bet sometimes, and versus this player, I'm actually going to 4-bet more than I probably ordinarily would versus most players.
Okay. You think he's out of line pre-flop as well?
Yes, out of line in most scenarios, I would say. Definitely post-flop, for sure, and pre-flop, at least versus recreationals, very, very wide. And the kind of player to pure 3-bet and then call hands that are meant to be kind of mixing 3-bet pre-flop and then maybe mixing fold as well, that kind of player. So we do face a donk on the flop, and what do you want to do here?
I think this is just wrong. I also could be way off here because I imagine there's going to be a bunch of guys just looking at the solves. But my instinct is that this board is not that good for the small blind in this situation at all. He generally misses this board for the most part. Actually, I don't want to say the most part, but he's got a lot of pocket pairs that are not happy on this board, and all of the immediately connecting hands, the 4-5 and the 6-7, right? That's basically it. Are mixed pre-flop. As a 3-bet, they do always call the 4-bet though. Before he donked, I was going to say I wanted to range bet this board. Now I'd have gone something like a smaller bet, let's say a third pot, and then some shoves. Because I think this board is just, I think you're definitely the first place guy here. You're in position. Agreed. And you've got more, actually, like you don't have queens, which is a big problem. But then queens without a diamond is like a mediocre hand on this board, to be fair.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would go with a full range bet versus, and that means that he just can't donk. But I could just be way off the
Sure, that's okay.
Market.
We're okay to be wrong on this channel.
Yeah. So I'll go with that kind of assumption that he's way off the mark here, and I would anyway call this hand, but I would imagine that he's kind of punting in some way. I would just like kind of play close attention. So that might mean that I want to call this hand a bit too much, right, on future streets. If I think that he's overvaluing or getting things wrong, like he might just sit there with 10 of hearts and or like 8-7 of hearts and just lead flop because he's got some back doors. But if his range can't support that, then he might just be out of line here. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
So my thinking here was that like I just don't really see, for the reasons you mentioned, why he shouldn't be donking. I then don't see great merits in just having much of a calling range on the flop. I thought I'd be playing like a lot more shove fold on the flop than defending, because my range is so condensed. So I'm going to have kings, which definitely wants to shove, aces, which is probably a combo that may well want to mix call. I don't have queens, as you said. Jacks is like awful, but like I think it probably just pushes its equity at this point. And then like we have a bunch of ace king as well, which like has really good equity versus what is a very clearly distinct donking range, which is going to be like queens, jacks, tens, right? So I did actually just decide to go with a shove, but I don't know if that's...
Actually, I like your logic. Yeah, obviously it's entirely dependent on what we think he's leading, right?
Sure.
But likely is the case, he's putting too much money in with a range that can't support it. So yeah, then I would agree you wanted to play too many shoves as a response. So I actually like that. That's better than what I said initially. I guess he folds when he faces the shove. He doesn't fold. I guess that's why you've included it.
Well, I included all the interesting hands from this session.
He has eights. That feels like such a thin call to me. Like just call sevens and sixes. Do you at least get there once?
No, unfortunately not this time.
Of course not. It's GG poker after all, right? El Mandalay, I played against this guy before.
Yeah, definitely capable player, for sure.
Yeah.
Pretty new, though. I haven't played with him that much.
Always a little bit wary in this. Oh, I guess you're not under the gun. But he might not see that.
True, actually.
This configuration, big blind versus EP, especially if you're UTG, is just always under 3-bet. So I would be wary. I wouldn't fold this hand, but I am just very wary of it. Like I'm folding other hands, let's say, like my ace queen off in this configuration is a mix. I would just pure fold that.
How much you stab in the flop with this combo? Because I obviously wanted to stab 6-5 over 5-4, but I still wanted to stab 5-4 like at least some of the time. But I am expecting to face check raise on this board like fairly, like not as often as maybe we should, but I am expecting to see it. It's not like it's just like a passive over check folded line.
I think it's actually significantly overfolded here, to be honest.
But
I don't think people are defending their checking range here much, to be honest. I would not expect anywhere near enough check raise, and I wouldn't expect... I guess I'm sure that they're under check raising more than under check calling. And I think both of them are not enough.
Fair enough.
So, but that doesn't mean I just want to auto stab this hand for what it's worth.
So you might know this play. You might have played them a bit on coin, actually.
No, played him.
Okay, kind of like on the tighter side, I would say. I think they play on GG as well. Not like super fighty.
Lovely screen name they've got there.
I guess my question here is, I'm using 2/3 check on the turn. I'm just wondering whether or not you would want to do anything differently to that.
No, I like 2/3. They've got more 10-7 than you as well, which is... I guess they 3-bet a lot of 10-7, but still they've got more than that. And they've also got a lot of these like 10-3 of club type hands as well. So they do pretty well on this turn.
Yeah, and I'm not betting my hand always on the turn either.
Yeah, I would actually like a lot of checks with your hand, to be fair.
Would you rather bet 9-8 than this? I'm blocking the jack.
No, I think 9-8 or check because you block his check back. So then you're going to get bet into very often. Plus just for this obvious fact that you value yourself versus your hand, like jack 8. Interesting. So I imagine this is a very good river for you. I say very good. So from a nut standpoint, probably not. But from an equity standpoint, well, I don't want to say equity, but let's say you've got a lot of random queens that have just fired the turn. Like you just bet queen 3 or diamond sometimes that he doesn't have. So I think if you look at this on the solver, I feel like your check frequency is very low here, but your big bet frequency is not necessarily high. It's like I would expect your check frequency here to be with your range to be like 25%, and then of the remaining bets, you probably find 50%, 55, 60% block. I think a lot of your range is supposed to block because he has a lot of tens, but you've got nothing here.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you've got some spade draws and you've got some 7-5 for double gutter on the turn.
Yep.
But that's about it, right? Like a lot of your immediate bluffs are wrapping around the queen in some way. And obviously your 10x and king queen and stuff just gets there.
Yeah.
So
what's the big sizing you're using here? B70?
No, I think you're supposed to have 3 sizings, which obviously we wouldn't want to do, or I wouldn't want to do. And between the 2 big sizings of 70 or overbet, I would go with an overbet here.
Okay.
Mainly because if I've got 2 pairs, I don't want to go big. I maybe you can go 2/3 with queen jack, but for the most part, your 8-9, your jack 8 is just handicapped to a block or a check call. Therefore, my 2/3 range doesn't exist as much as I want it to. So I would rather play. That's just my preference. Like I don't think this is actually going to cost you any money. It's just your preference.
And this is something I talk about in my videos quite a lot. It's talking about like how like you want your bet sizing needs to be around the wealth of the value bets, which is like, as you say, like a lot of the 2 pairs are just not going to be worth an overbet here, or you're going to have more 10x than you are like 2 pairs that are going to want to go big. So you just want to be using the big sizing with most of your 10s, right?
Yeah, and that wealth is also subjective too.
Sure.
Some people might prefer to leverage a different, or like have a different wealth definition in this hand.
Yeah.
So
I do decide to go with a block always on the river.
I don't like that, to be honest. Why do you? I'm curious why you really want to bet this one.
More than other combos? More than what?
Or just bet versus check.
Oh, you want to check?
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I don't think imposition is going to reopen hands that are going to call the river. So I don't think they're going to reopen with like worse 2 pairs. I don't think they're going to bet 9-8 on the river. And also, I unblock Queen X as well, which is going to be like Queen X. There are loads of Queen X that are going to be calling flop and turn as well, with flush draws on the turn.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't hate betting, but I also think there's good arguments to check. You unblock spades, and if he's got a jack or an 8 and he bets, it's safe to say that he's got a better hand than you. So you only block better hands, right? He's either got 10-8, jack 10, queen jack, maybe pocket 8s. So your cards block better hands, block checkbacks, and then unblock a bunch of bluffs. So I think the reasons for checking as well are very good here. I don't think there's any player profile reads you can have in this spot because realistically everyone bluffs what they're supposed to bluff, I would imagine.
Actually, looking at this now, maybe actually betting like a 9-8 if we have it is infinitely better. Unblocking calls from a jack and blocking checkbacks.
I would just roll in this spot. I don't usually do much rolling on the river, but this one just feels like rolling is usually good when there's no reason to adjust to villain, and I think this is one of the rare cases where, unless you suspect villain to just massively underbluff, because I don't think you can really overbluff this spot unless he just turns 9-7 into a bluff, right?
No, you're right.
If you expect him to bluff accordingly, which I guess he would, and then value bet accordingly, which is like if he actually value bets too much, you'd rather bet fold, I guess. Yeah. True. But yeah, I just think this is like going down the middle here, and I probably just would roll half the time to bet, half the time to check, and then call. And I'm guessing you get raised here.
Yeah, I get small raised though, which is interesting.
How small is small? Oh, very small. So
yeah, it's like third pot.
Yeah, you get 4-1, right?
I guess I'll just share my thoughts. My thoughts basically are that this player is relatively very straightforward. It feels fairly unintuitive to use this sizing as a bluff sizing to me. Perhaps they don't feel like they need to go large to make me fold, because if they assume that I'm only going to be continuing with a 10 here, then they don't need to raise bigger.
I tend to think this is just underbluffed.
Yeah, I did decide to fold. And
yeah, I would
quite good about it. All right, Ace-3 Diamonds opened. Get called by a new player on the button from Ireland, I think. And no reads on them. I assume that based on a little bit later down the line, I think there's some kind of reg. Flop I decided to raise very often.
Do you range check flop?
No, I'm not range checking this flop, actually. I want to bet. I think Global's going to be betting sometimes, but not much. But in all honesty, when I did check my hand and I did see a bet, I did decide to always raise.
Okay. Why?
I think Verse is a player that I don't know, who's going to make a lot more mistakes, particularly in the spot where like they're facing a check raise rather than just like a check call. I think they're probably going to make many, many more large EV errors in a spot that I'm more comfortable in than they're more comfortable, well, as comfortable in potentially. You agree? Disagree?
I agree, but I think you should do that with value, not bluffs. So
I mean, it's
think
kind of his value, right? In terms of equity.
Well, basically, you're saying you're gonna. Okay, so if you define what you think the mistakes are, I'm presuming what you mean is that he's going to overvalue hands, right?
Yeah, overvalue hands, or maybe even like overfold the flop. Maybe like bet fold a hand like ace 4 on the flop, or pocket nines with a diamond, or something like that potentially.
Which one?
Could be any of or all of the above.
Then it breaks even. I think you should make it the like determination
True.
between.
Yeah.
Like my opinion here is that I don't think it's gonna, on the flop and turn at least, I think he's gonna underfold equity just in general.
Yeah. True,
So.
yeah, true.
With a hand that wants a fold, you don't want to get continued here. If you get a fold on flop that's better than getting called, then I would under check raise, because I don't think, like, if you check raise the flop and bet the turn, for example, if you check raise flop with the sizing that you did, which is pretty large, and then a 7 rolls off and you pot the turn, he's already supposed to be folding a bunch of jack 10, right? Or at least being indifferent. And he's just not a random guy from Ireland.
Yeah, that's true. That is actually very true.
But your hand wanted to fold on the flop, definitely wants to fold on the turn. So I agree that he would make mistakes or more mistakes, but just because he makes those mistakes doesn't mean that we just put our bluffs and value into the same region. We should then do different things.
I guess that is true, but and also like so would you rather raise ace 5 of clubs on this flop than this hand?
I just wouldn't bluff enough if I think he underfolds.
Okay, so
that's my thoughts.
I guess okay. That does make perfect sense. I think a big part of the reason I'm raising this combo is because it makes the nuts like a decent amount of the time. So like this seems like a much better raise than a hand like I'm not like jacks or like ace 10 necessarily, but like you kind of get the idea of what kind of where I'm taking it. Yeah.
You would what you're having to do is like calculate the extra EV you get by making the nuts exploitatively versus the extra EV you lose by him not folding hands you need him to fold. I can see that. I didn't actually appreciate your side of the picture enough. Definitely, if I was to think about ace 3 of diamonds versus ace 5 of clubs, then I would be closer to raising your combo now, just because you do, as you say, you make the nuts more often.
Sure. Okay. Either way, when we do get bet called on the flop and see a pretty bad card for our range, I would say, I decide to check very often. Well, always actually on the turn.
Yeah, but for the reasons that we discussed, you should definitely check the turn now, I think. Because also he's not going to fold under pairs enough too.
Exactly.
I think it's fair to say. Are you approaching him as like a regular or a recreational here?
Well, more like a potential regular, but not classing them as a regular.
Who are the other players on the table? Because if they're all regulars, then surely that guy is a spot, right?
He had just started and just sat. And he's playing a couple of tables in 25 VPIP. Obviously, probably not of that many hands, but I mean, this is not a good table. I only sat because I wasn't sure who they were, and I ended up leaving very soon after, I think.
Okay, fine.
And then on the queen, I just decided I have enough showdown versus other flush draws here. And some other, I don't really necessarily think that we have great blockers to bluff here. Kind of blocking the hands that we want him to fold, maybe like ace 7 of diamonds, ace jack of diamonds type hands. So I decided to give up. Queen is pretty good for our range, though, to be honest with you, especially when he doesn't take the betting opportunity on the turn. But I did decide to check. Would you do this or no?
Very good result. It just comes down to who I think he is. If I think he's a recreational, I would probably just shove outright because he doesn't have a calling range enough of the time.
Yeah.
He might spike a queen, but he doesn't spike enough queens, and he certainly doesn't have a 10. And also, if he does river a queen, he still might fold. Yeah, so he just doesn't have a defense. But if he was a regular, then I would just play your line, and I would just probably check, because your ace of diamonds is just absolutely horrendous here. For the same reasons you check, he probably checks the turn as well with your hand. Maybe not your exact hand, but like ace, ace whatever of diamonds.
Right, this hand is really interesting, and I think that you're going to have a lot to say about this one because I was quite lost. Defend big blind. Mikhail is very good reg. Strong player. So I'm going to play relatively theory, or that's what I would like to do. That's not to say that they're playing super theory, but you get the idea. I raise my hand very often on the flop.
It's interesting. I wouldn't have raised super often. I would have raised less than half the time, let's say. Only because this is definitely a favorable rule for him, and your flush draw is mediocre.
And then turn, what is our sizing scheme?
You have to go less than 50, I guess. and then it's kind of up to you what you want to do. I don't think you can go. I guess there's a world that you go to 2/3 and just like hyperpolarize, and even start to mix some of your low flush draws because even though you get a bit thin now, but I'd probably just go B50 here.
Okay.
Because you're betting, I guess, King Queen with a diamond plus for B50, and that seems like an okay approach.
Seems pretty thin to me.
It's got a nice redraw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you put 50 in here, what is it, 17 big blinds? So you're betting like 8.5 blinds for King Queen with the Queen of Diamonds. I think that's fair. Also, he did size down the flop, and there's a good chance that he is splitting because this is not a range bet board by any means.
Yeah. So you can see I'm wanting to go with a half. I think I end up going smaller though in the end. Yeah.
I guess this is fine, but the only thing is that you're very polarized here.
This is why I thought it'd be interesting for you to look at it, because I intuitively felt like this sizing was wrong, but I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't figure out where like the threshold started and finished. So like, do I want to bet like King Queen as you said, and if I do, then I'm probably using this sizing, and then or do I want to use like build around my flushes on my boats, because like we should have a boat advantage here, right? I would guess because he's gonna play some 3-bets on the flop. So
I don't think he does. Well, I mean,
he only went small on the flop, didn't he?
Yeah, he bet small, but who knows? I would imagine that you've got a boat disadvantage here. But if he plays 3-bets on flop, then you've just got a massive advantage, and you just don't have the information for that.
Sure. And then on the river,
yeah.
Again, I wasn't 100% sure, because now I've used block on the turn, like assuming now we do have hands like King Queen. Do you think that's worth another street? It's very close. So like my sizing scheme then, therefore, is probably going to be flushes and boats.
Actually, because you block the turn, I think King Queen is worth blocking the river here.
Okay,
so this is what, 27, you're putting in 6, and you've gone 4 on the turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've gone 5 check right, 5 big blind check raise, 4 on the turn, 6 on the river. I think King Queen is fine for that.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Sure.
So yeah, I think you can play block, and then your bigger sizing here. Again, I think it does come down to whether or not you think he has 3-bets on flop, because if he does, then you maybe could find some shoves. But yeah, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably just play block and 2/3 and not find shove, because you can just sit there with all manner of boats, even some hands that you can't have, like quads. Okay. And well, you could have quads very occasionally, and then obviously kings.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly what my approach was here. Well, no, I can remember that I didn't want to use block with King Queen. I think that was something along the line. I thought the bottom of my value range was like low flushes. So I was like, maybe I'm just using 2/3 and then all in here because I've got boats as well.
Low flushes are not worth 2/3, I don't think. Like if you sit here with 4 5 of diamonds or 4 deuce of diamonds here, is it really worth this sizing?
It's marginal as hell.
Yeah, I mean,
super
it's hard.
marginal.
I'm trying to think about it because like I keep on thinking through the lens of betting half pot on the turn, and then for sure you can't go 2/3.
Yeah.
I guess if you do go 1/3 on the turn and you haven't raised massive on the flop, then yeah, okay. So I think you can go 2/3 with a low flush, and I think shoving. I don't like shoving here, to be honest with you, because every hand you have, he can have. In my opinion.
So you just maybe want to use one sizing of 2/3 pot.
You've just got so many options.
Yeah,
I prefer the 1/3, 2/3. If you don't want to have 1/3, then I guess you could play 2/3 and some shove. There's also a world that you play 2/3 only, but then you're kind of omitting both of the small and big sizing, which just doesn't seem like a great strategy here. So yeah, I think you want to have 2/3 and then just pick your poison on if you want to have a big sizing or a small sizing, because obviously 2/3 is your core sizing here, right? For your wealth of middling flush draws that don't lose to high ones so often.
Yeah,
if you face shove, this is turbo fold, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I was going to fold. Yeah, got no blockers to value range.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. Maybe it's just ace jack of diamonds, but it's probably a mix in theory. But I think in reality, it's fold is good.
Yeah, it's going to be like all of these flushes are going to like, you know how solver is. Oh, let's call this one 17% and let's call this one 11%, but I would not do that.
Sheezy, pretty strong reg. I wouldn't say like deviating hugely or giving me reason to do crazy things versus this particular player type. I'm going to be using half pot check on the flop. Going to bet in my hand like a bit less than tens with the club, but I'm definitely going to be betting like probably around global, about half the time, I would say.
I like checking your hand here because you've got the double offsuits. You're blocking all of those hands you want them to call. You do block the Jack 10 twice, but then you block the 8-10 and 10-9 twice.
I decide to bet my hand some of the time on the turn, and the size I'm going to use is 2/3 pot.
I guess it doesn't matter. Like I think there's like some exploit that you can have here, which is that you unblock his bluffing range of the river, because I don't think he actually. I think the way humans play here is if they have a 10, they just bet the turn.
Yeah.
And probably they're supposed to anyway, because their 10s are going to be king 10, ace 10, which are just supposed to bet. So I think you're doing quite well by unblocking their bluffs.
To check back turn to call river, you mean?
Yeah, because I think the way human people, the way humans bluff the river is that you have good unblockers to that region. And I don't think this is a board that they would underbluff. I think it's like quite an okay looking board for them to do that.
Yeah.
So I think there is a world where you can overcheck this spot.
Sure. And does it play any factor that like you don't see this hand really on very many runouts going for 2 streets?
Yeah, maybe a bit too. Yeah, for sure. There's going to be like a subconscious bias there for me.
Sure.
So I think I would actually probably play a bit. And again, the same thing. If you had 10s with a heart here, I'd be more incentivized to bet, because then at least you're unblocking one combo 10-8 to be calling. But in this way, you're blocking the 4 combos of the 10-9-8-10.
Very good river. So he checks to us. What do you want to do?
It's the best river in the deck, right?
Yeah.
For you. Wow. Not bad. Well, that's a sick play. If you,
don't. Yeah, I mean, like, don't get too baited by what I'm doing, because I may not do that.
Yeah, this is for the thumbnail.
You tell me what you think we should be doing first here.
I think this is a bet in theory as a mix. My instinct is that this is just right on the line between a bet and a check. It's usually a bet and a check back, and then you get this exact river and it wants to mix. I don't think you're supposed to pure bet though. You're betting what? Like, I'm presuming you bet B70, which is going to be like 29 blinds, or 28 blinds. And I just think this hand has to be mixing for that. In reality, if I was playing, I would bet, and I really think it's a mistake actually.
To bet.
Yeah, because I don't see him calling too much here. I for the third time now, you block the calling range to the 10, 9, 9, 10, and he might underbet a jack on the turn, right? Like humans might just take their jacks into a checking line on the turn. And lastly, I don't think they sit there in hero call, because I actually think this is a spot where if you had a bluff, you would check back a lot of the time. Like, would you overbluff this spot?
No, definitely not. Right,
and I feel like a good player might pick up on the fact that if you sit here with something like King 5 offsuit without a club, or rather King 5 offsuit with a club, you might not fire enough at the time. So therefore, their bluff catchers, let's just say Ace 4, King 8, I don't think they call enough. So I think you should check, and I believe that you're going to do what I would do, which is like make a slightly, I think I'm projecting here, a slightly losing bet exploitatively. I think in theory it's a fine play, but I just don't think they actually roll their calls enough at the time.
So the reason I decide to bet simply is, if this is against like one of the other blue tags, I'm just going to check back. But versus this player who I think is thinking, which ironically, now you've said what you're saying, if they are thinking, then they're probably going to figure out to fold.
Yeah.
Then that was the reason I decided to bet. But yeah, maybe in hindsight, not great. I thought exactly the same as you, by the way, that I thought this was going to be mixed in theory, but I actually decided to pure bet.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the game of 2020 hindsight when you're doing hand
Yeah,
reviews.
of course.
Like, what you've done here is, why does he think with that? He's thinking of shoving. I think I would make the mistake, and I wouldn't care too much about it, to be honest.
Okay, sure. Okay, so this is against Scott, and 3-bet pocket aces.
Good times.
And face the 4-bet, yeah. So just going to, like, in these exact positions, I'm going to be shoving aces a lot more than other positions. But I did roll, and it was a call on this occasion.
It should be a boring hand if you shove pre-flop.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I agree with the whole point of calling more in later positions mainly.
And then we got like the most unbelievably OP suits here. So like, if I face bet on this flop, I don't think this is a board where we're like playing raise fold. I think this is definitely a board like we're calling on as well. And I think with these exact suits, I probably would always just call this combo. I would raise my other combos of aces always though.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
But he does check to us. And similar to the reasons why I would only play call on the flop, I actually decided to check my hand on the flop, because I think that when we hold these suits, I think Scott is going to have so much more of like the diamond and spade region that are just going to be check folding.
Yeah. This
So,
is similar to the 4-5 of diamonds hand where I think their checking range is pretty exposed here,
yeah,
specifically in a 4-bet pot. You know, you mentioned the whole like era of 500 zoom 4 years ago versus
yeah.
now, where they've got a lot better in 3-bet pots. I don't think they've got much better in, not that this is 500 zoom, but I don't think players, you and me included, are doing anywhere near a good enough job of protecting our checking range in the spot here.
Yeah.
At least I would, frankly, not do a good job of doing that.
So kind of similar reasons to the others to the like the flop and turn reasoning is with my hand again. I think I've just like unblock bluffs and like don't think protection and denial is important here. Like there's not a single river that I'm not willing to not get this in, and I don't think there's a river that like Scott is going to have a value hand that he's going to not end up getting it in as well. So I just see my hand as like invincible combo. So I decide to call. You can see that I slide out the bet slider in consideration as well.
Yeah, I think that's very good because some players might trick themselves into the straight rivers being really bad for them. Obviously, you would rather see a deuce of diamonds than nine of diamonds, but the straight rivers are a little bit bait on how bad they are, and the clubs at the same time. So like this 4 it might as well be a brick at this point. There is ace 5, but
which we blocked twice.
Yeah, we blocked twice. So there's that, and also the clubs as well. The only combos that we expect a villain to not bet on the flop would be ace X. So yeah, with your exact hand on this exact board and these exact positions, the flush and straight rivers are really not much of a concern. So I like your reasoning there.
Yeah, I mean we'll skip it. It's just he just folds worse my shove. I decided to call. So cutoff is quite a passive recreational. I think squeezing is going to be okay, but I don't expect the recreational to fold versus 3-bet much at all. And I don't think 10-9 is a hand I really need. I mean, like, I obviously can 3-bet, it's fine. I'd rather 3-bet a hand like ace-10 suited, I think. Just a bit more high card heavy.
Yeah, I would be very cool happy here. I would not like squeezing. Well, that timing and sizing is sizing's not that much of a problem, but he snap bet the flop here.
And then Rodriguez snap calls the flop as well. I decided to call the flop and not raise this hand, by the way. I think if I had more of like if I was going to do some raising, I just don't expect the recreational fold versus my bet that much. I would just rather have like a backdoor flush draw with my 10-9 or like Jack 10 of spades or something like that before this one.
Yeah. Well, nice. Oh, God. Why did you check?
So this is my question. Do you think we should be leading the turn here?
Yeah. We know that Tutti, or H. Rodriguez, his name in stars is Tutti, right? Yeah. We know that he's not got a straight or a set.
Sure.
And so you've got the best hand against him unless he's got exactly... I guess he could have some... Yeah, whatever. His range is pretty capped. And then the cutoff player doesn't have a 9, right? He's got... Yes, he might have some straights, but also he's got a bunch of other hands that you want him to put money in. So yeah, you can just kind of like tell the button what your hand is.
Yeah.
And I still think make more money than checking, because in this configuration of Tutti's snap call and this guy's bet of half pot.
Yeah.
Like this is just going to go check way too often here. If he, by the way, I just want to say, if he did bet bigger on the flop, like if this guy potted out the flop, I'd be more inclined to check the turn.
Sure.
Because then he's not got this like middling part of the range, like let's say king queen that just checks. He's more polarized to a straight, let's say.
Yeah.
And then like queen jack that might bet itself.
Yeah. So basically, the cutoff was quite passive, and I hadn't played with them for that many hands. So that's the reason I didn't want to. Well, firstly, I didn't raise the flop, but I still don't necessarily. So what I'm saying is, I think that the betting the turn is good, and also I don't think that the cutoff is capped. Is what I'm saying, based on the kind of the passivity of how they played. So they weren't the type of player just to kind of like pot and then half pot as well. But I didn't have like solid reads. But I still think donking probably is just going to be the best play.
It's not that they. I think they're capped. I do give them straights.
Yeah.
It's that when he goes half pot, he's got more natural checks on the turn than if he goes pot.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Unless half pot is their only sizing.
Yeah, true.
But we don't know that.
We don't know that, and also he shouldn't have offsuit king 10. Well, hopefully not. Yeah. Right, in these positions he did call.
So now
this is now very worrying. Oh, we just have to press call here. I think anything else would be a mistake. 9 deal at one time. 9 of spades for a massive caller. Well, what would you get here if 9 of spades rolls off?
Then you'd have to withdraw your roll because there'll be 2 9 of spades on board.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Anyway, what do you want to do on the river here? I mean, I'll tell you. I decided that given the kind of like, yes, they can have straights on the flop and turn, but obviously now we do have a straight. So I decide to donk the river.
Yes.
Not big, medium. Medium to small.
Yeah, I think perfect. I think 40 or 50.
I think I went 40.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what I would do. Yeah, this is really good. This is like just below 40. I think it's very good.
And then the passive recreational does this. The absolute mini click.
I mean, if he's a passive guy, you just have to fold here because you don't chop.
Bearing in mind, okay, so like we haven't played many hands, so like our reads aren't super sound. It's not like we played like 2,000 hands of this player and that they've got very clear sizing, telegraphing like strength of hand. And also remember, we are calling 380 into 1800.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we have I am very happy versus recreationals, as you know.
Yeah.
If he is some kind of passive guy, he has absolutely zero bluffs here. The only way he has bluffs is if he's had a really bad day and he's tilted, right?
Yeah. What about King 10 though that we chop with? 10-8.
Yeah, that was just getting to that. But my point is that he's got no bluffs. So I think in this spot he has a bluff. Clearly, he's just giving it away. Okay, I would call. That's cool. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, this is the way I approach spots: is that if they are recreational, they don't have strategical bluffs. They've just got like blow-ups.
Yeah.
Right. If they're a nitty guy, if they're a more active recreational, they can bluff. But when they're nitty, I don't think they actually have the game plan or like even awareness that they should have bluff bets and bluff raises. Like to some players, to some recreationals, bluffing is not a good play. Like just as a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So then these players are more blow-ups, which are more unpredictable. So like maybe you can give them like, I don't know, 5% occurrence or something. But yeah, there's the fact that you can chop with a 10. I probably would end up calling. Wow, A6 is so crazy. I would then adjust the tag massively.
Yeah. I almost definitely did. I like to think anyway.
Nice and deep with small blind here. Who is small blind? I've never seen that.
You do know this player. I don't really want to out their name. They're a long-term reg. Doesn't get too kind of out of line. Plays pretty solid. And yeah, I think that's pretty much a fair summary. So we're obviously a bit deeper. I want to call some, but I want to 4-bet. And when I do 4-bet, I'm making it big. Making it about just over 3x.
Yeah, seems good.
I kept changing my sizing by one big blind.
Yeah.
Very quick call.
Yes. Yeah, I wonder why he calls so fast there.
I decided to range bet the flop. Even more so with my exact combo. We're in the weeds here.
Yeah. I guess if you were to compare 100 to 180 or 190, whatever you are, this should be a bit less favorable for you because he has more jacks and queens and you have less jacks and queens.
Yeah, true.
Even tens as well. You even 4-bet tens, 100 blinds. So that would be a reason not to range bet, but maybe you still are.
Yeah.
Like maybe you just go from a range bet to a range bet, but you're just a little bit less happy. What was your sizing?
I went 1/3 pot, 27%.
Okay.
On this turn, if this was like 10 of hearts, I think I'm just going to play half pot in position or somewhere around that, maybe 40%, maybe even 60%, somewhere like above a block. But I think when flush comes in, I don't really think that, given that we're this deep, I want to start putting in half pot with like kings, no club, for example.
Yeah, and he's got more flushes as well because he check rips less often.
Exactly.
So like for all of the above, he's got more jacks, more queens, more flushes. You've got less reason to go triple off with kings, no club.
Yeah. So I decided to go with a block sizing, and I do decide to bet my hand very, very often.
Yeah, you don't block folds here, at least to your king of clubs. So your king of clubs is very... Actually, that's true with ace of clubs as well.
Admittedly, just as a side point, I would much rather bet ace club jack here than this combo, I think. But we're splitting kind of hairs, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I bet most of the time, but not always. As simple as that. And yeah, I think block is very good here. This is such a dream spot to get a fold in, but you never get folds. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
Guess he has to call.
Well, there's no snap call on the turn now, which is interesting. So
it is interesting. Yeah.
So like, and as we've talked about a couple of times, and as we talk about a lot in our study, actually, we don't want to project too much into timings and sizings, but we can make some assumptions. The fact that there's a very quick call on the flop kind of suggests to me that it's less kind of like not flush draw and more kind of pocket pair. And also on the turn, when it's a tank call, I would say that now could be flushes, as well as like marginal, like drop pocket jacks, pocket queens type combos that are in a bit of a tough spot. And then it can also be obviously pocket tens. But I think the flop snap is more likely to be weak than the turn tank call.
Yeah, was it a tank call, by the way?
It was a more than a tank than the flop for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
yeah,
He called within 4 seconds, not 1 second.
exactly. I think it was
Right,
maybe
yeah.
even a little bit longer.
Yeah,
Okay, so we get
okay.
arrived at the river and it does check to us, and I'll just give you my thoughts and then you can see kind of what you're thinking.
Hmm.
I know for a fact that it would be extremely easy to overbluff this spot simply because I have ace jack, ace queen, ace king of single club varieties. And if I'm obviously not allowed to bluff all those because my value region here is probably going to be pocket kings with a club plus. I don't think I get to shove kings no club. I think it's close. Maybe we do. It's like 2/3 pot. I mean, you can share your thoughts on that in a moment. Um, but I would always bluff if I had ace jack with the ace of clubs. So that's already a bunch of combos. And then I probably would bluff ace of clubs. See, would I rather bluff ace club queen or ace club king unblocking queens? I think I'd probably rather bluff ace club king than ace club queen. So I would definitely bluff ace club jack and then ace club king and then maybe check ace club queen. And then with this exact combo, I just don't see how I'm allowed to bluff the king of clubs ever in this situation on the river. One last thing, I do block ace eight of hearts, which is definitely an important consideration for my value range. Whether or not he calls that on the turn is another question entirely.
So firstly, about the kings no club shove, you're shoving 100 into 165.
Yeah.
I think you probably can mix kings. I think this is exactly like your tens with your jack river. I think it's on the money. But I think it's one of those. Yeah, I am gonna just say it's a mix, but probably mixing mostly a check. But I think
with our
you're
combo
around the
or with
cusp.
kings with a club.
Kings.
Okay.
Kings. No, kings without a club.
Okay.
I'm saying kings without a club is like just anyway because you asked for my thoughts. I get that's my thought. A few other things. So firstly, you are going to have other hands without clubs. You're just going to have some amount of 6-5 here, right? Some amount of 6-7 here, some amount of ace-4, ace-5, king jack, king queen without clubs.
Yeah.
These hands are all auto give ups.
Yes.
Right. So we want to appreciate that we've got a good amount of, like, if we just count them, we've got ace-4, ace-5, ace-9, ace-7, king jack, king queen, maybe king-9, maybe queen-9. All of these hands are some amount of frequency. I think that's fair to say. Okay, there might be like one or combo. There's some hands that you do. I always forget the king-9, whether it's big blind or small blind. I think jack-9 or queen-9 does both. So anyway, what I'm saying is you've got some other hands. And I would also check all of those combos on this river without a club.
Yeah.
So there is some other hands we give up. And lastly as well, you were mentioning how you didn't think you had a nut flush draw based on the flop call. So then why do we want to have ace club X over just having ace X jack? So I would actually want to have ace heart jack club here, ace heart queen club, ace heart king club, because I feel like these are actually blocking more of the flush draws based on what your reasoning was on the flop.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that I don't feel super confident in that. I'm making kind of like an assumption. I don't feel super confident that when they do snap call the flop that is more likely to be pocket pairs than nut flush draws.
Not pocket pairs compared to nut flush draws. Nut flush draws compared to lower flush draws. I feel pretty confident about that. I don't really think there's a world where this guy calls an ace X. Like, what happens when you call it ace X suited here, whether it's going to be ace 9, ace 5, ace jack, is when humans hit these kind of boards, like when the guy has ace 9 of clubs here, I don't think they snap call versus block. I really don't think they do that. So I'd be pretty convicted in my thoughts there and say that I don't think it has enough flush draw. Therefore, I would want to have my jack of clubs, not only for the fact we block more flushes, because I think that if we were to give him a snap call, he would have more low flushes than high flushes. And secondly, then by having jack of clubs, we would block his pocket pairs with a club.
That is definitely true, yeah. Although, like, jacks with a club are going to be mixed anyway, though, no? So,
but jacks without a club is probably a pure fold.
Yeah, true. And also that, yeah, I guess when you don't have the jack of clubs, they're going to have more flushes just naturally.
Yeah. So I think for that reason, I would maybe just give up my ace club combo. This is also 2020 hindsight again, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think your ace of clubs is good with him not having nut flush draws in range. Again, like, we have to. This is not solver output. Or it might be, who knows? But yeah, I think if we don't give him enough flush draws, then we need to have these lower kickers that block more likely calls.
Vis-a-vis, do you bluff your hand here?
Based on everything that we said, yes.
Okay.
because I would give up my 6-5, my queen 9, my jack 9, my king jack, and then my ace club jack sometimes. Because ace club jack now is blocking all the folds.
Sure.
Queens. Yeah, even if I give him that hand, I still feel okay with the bluff. Your bet needs to get through about 40-something% of the time, right? It's about 2/3 pot, and that needs to work about 42% or whatever it is. So even against that hand, I don't think it was more than 58% of the time.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I mean, obviously, it is exactly this combo. Who knows about versus range, but yeah, okay. So this is just a bit of a weird hand. A bit of like an exploit question for you is I 4-bet pre-flop, button versus small blind, versus the same player who raised us on the river when we had jack 8.
Yep.
And now they donk the flop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know this is the thing. I don't do it, but I know it's a thing when it's ace-high board.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think it's also like massive fancy face syndrome as well.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Like he might know it's a thing, but he's also never looked at it more than like an Excel equity breakdown where it's like, oh, equity wise you can lead, but then you're immediately in no man's land. You've unnecessarily complicated the spot.
Sure. Well, I do continue.
Yeah. Yeah, for the main thing is that I don't think it really puts you in a tough spot. If you got a jack nine of clubs, you just fold. If you've got an ace, you probably press call. I guess it's just like don't give away the time you've got ace king. It's like all that you're asked to do here.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, I'm never going to raise the flop, so
I would have raises here.
actually, maybe I should be raising like ace king, and maybe just
Yeah.
actually so many aces actually. Ace queen plus probably. We face another donk on the turn.
Well, see bet now.
You fold or call?
20 into 80. Queens with a diamond. It's definitely going to be mixed. I said mixed this whole video, but I really think the spots are mixes.
Yeah. And in reality, so if you think that someone has seen that you donk this flop and it's allowed, which way do you think that weights the value of their range, the strength of their range? Do you think it shifts it more into like the 5, 4, 8, 7, 6, 5 region, or more of the issue is that we double a lot of value so incredibly hard here with ace queen?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, to your question, I don't think about it so broadly. I think of the situation. There are some boards that I think they would underlead for value. Other boards I think they can overbluff. In this exact spot, I think they would underbluff only because it's easy to forget that this is their leading spot, right? If they've got queen, 10 of diamonds or whatever, or like some random draw, it's easy to just like check the flop and then wait for you to bet. But then when they have an ace, they can remember, oh, this is the thing when they've got ace jack.
Yeah, or pocket eights.
Or pocket eights, yeah, or whatever. So I would expect it's underbluffed, so therefore we should fold. And I do think queens without a diamond here is a pure fold, and I think queens with a diamond is a mix. Even though you block more bluffs, is like, yeah, there's a reason for that, but I think you should fold exploitatively here.
I really wasn't sure, and I was really unhappy, but I decided to fold.
Well, I hope you're against the big blind here.
I don't. I really don't. Versus Scott again. 3-bet kings. Oh, this is the very last hand, actually. And you can see the L56 has been upgraded in that time between the last hand and this one.
Well, what is the green tag?
So green tag is like very, very kind of... I'll have like specific notes on them, but like the dark green is kind of like recreational on probation to make sure before I make like proper notes on them, and then I upgrade them or downgrade them depending on what they are. I think this is a pretty standard one. Sizing scheme on the flop. I'm going to
just go small range. Sorry, you were
going
to
say
say
the same. Small. Yeah, I don't range bet this board actually. I usually size. I go half pot and then check some. Maybe
I think you're thinking of big blinds.
Yeah, potentially, but that was the approach I was going for in this hand.
Okay.
I actually want to sim this one afterwards. After the call, I'm going to look at this one immediately.
This to me seems like it's the easy range bet. If I was going to go half pot check, I would pure check kings, 40% stab.
Yes, Scott has 40% stabs in a lot of spots, flops and turns.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Seems like a pretty good card for in position, the 5.
No, I think this is a good card for you because you're the check caller. He can have nothing. You can't have nothing. So this should be good for you. You should have an equity. I think you should not have any leads, but I think this is definitely a better turn relative to an average turn.
So like the way I kind of perceive this spot is that like when he stabs air balls on the flop, combos like 8, 7, 7, 6, and then deuces 3s. I mean, deuces and 3s aren't really air, but like it's kind of a card that gives in position, like gives their bluffing flop range equity on the turn much more than a lot of other cards, like high cards, for example.
Yeah, but the same could be said about almost every turn. Like there's not a turn that doesn't happen apart from exactly a 9. So a deuce 3 5, 6, 7, 8 give some straight draws, and a 10 through king give straight draws. So only a 9 is a brick. And also 6, 7, and etc. is not the only hands in his range. He's also just got the jack nines that miss, which you don't have.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
like if you were to just like control H and Pio and see the average EV, 5 should be better for you than an average card, but it's still not good enough for you to play leads.
Sure. In fact, what I might do after production here is I might chuck the sim up now so that people can see what we are supposed to do on the flop and turn, because it would be interesting. Turn, I basically figured that I am going to have to be continuing kings here, like most of the time, but not always. I thought it was going to be a high frequency call. And versus Scott, I am playing like pretty theory, or trying to play pretty theory. So I did kind of stick with that approach, and I decided to call my hand 60 on the turn and fold 40.
I would expect this hand to be pure call, could be way off. I would mix queens and below. Kings would be the single hand, because it's like a Badoogie paired board.
Yeah.
I don't think he's supposed to bluff any of the king highs, or very, very few of them.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that the kings, especially, even though you block less of the ace queen compared to ace king, I would have thought this one would be pure call.
Sure. He did have ace jack here, so who cares?
Savings.
Unbelievable savings. Well, guys, definitely do let us know if you want to see more of Luke on the channel. And actually, right now, Luke and I are going to record a video on his channel. It is not live yet, but it will be. Do you want to say a little bit about the channel?
I'm going to start a YouTube channel. It's going to be called Know Your Poker. And I'm also starting a website as well, which is knowyourpoker.com. It's going to be, I don't want to say a training site. It's basically like a GTO Wizard version where you've got some training tools, but there's not going to be any videos like you would get on Run It Once or Upswing Poker. So yeah, the YouTube channel is going to have some stuff like this, some hand reviews, some live plays, some just general poker strategy that we can talk over. And then I've got a lot of custom tools that I've made that you can't get anywhere else, which I'm going to be showcasing and selling. So yeah, feel free to check out the version. With Ben, I'm going to have him review my VODs. It's not going to be going over hand histories in this format, but similar. And hopefully it should also be enjoyable.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming on. And guys, if you enjoy this type of content, definitely do go ahead and drop a sub. And I'll put Luke's channel in the description if he has made it. But until next time, take care, and we will see you at the tables.